He played piano in the train station every day, until one listener came back. He played the piano like he was speaking to someone who wasn't there. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. Walter Reed came to the train station every morning at 9:45. He sat at the upright Yamaha tucked beside the main terminal entrance near the newsstand, just past the ticket machines. It was an old piano with scratched keys and a faded finish, but it stayed in tune because he tuned it himself once a month. No one asked him to, no one paid him to, but the station manager liked him and let it happen. He wore the same soft blue jacket and gray cap each day, sat down without ceremony, placed his fingers on the keys like he was picking up a conversation from the day before. He never used sheet music. He didn't need it. His hands knew the way. The first song was always the same. Something simple. Something warm. Then he'd move into the others. Classical pieces, soft jazz, old love songs from the 40s. He'd play for 90 minutes, take a short break to drink from the thermos he carried, then play again until the rush hour foot traffic began around 4. Most people passed by. Some dropped change in the jar. Some didn't notice he was there. Others lingered for a moment, eyes distant, as if something in the music made them stop walking, even if they didn't know why. Walter never said much. He nodded if someone thanked him, smiled if a child clapped. But mostly, he played. He had been a music teacher for over 30 years. He taught hundreds of kids. Some stuck with it. Some didn't. But he remembered them all. Their fingers fumbling over scales. The look on their faces when they finally got it right. He had loved teaching, but he had loved playing more. His wife, Mary Ann, used to come with him. She'd sit on the bench across from the piano with a book in her lap. She'd read the same chapter 5 times over because she was listening more than reading. They used to walk to the station together, arm in arm, and walk home the same way after the evening trains had come and gone. When she passed, the walking stopped. But the playing didn't. The piano became his way back into the world, the station his place to be useful. He never missed a day unless it was raining hard enough to flood the streets. And even then, he'd call the station to let them know he wouldn't make it, just in case anyone noticed he was gone. No one ever called back. That never bothered him. He didn't play for a crowd. He played because music filled the space that grief had hollowed out. He watched people, though. Watched how they moved, how they hurried, how they waited. He remembered faces the way other people remembered songs. There was a woman who cried quietly every Tuesday at 3:15. A man who came just to listen to the 3rd song in the set, always left before the 4th. A couple who stood far apart at first but sat closer together each week. Walter noticed all of it. It was late March when he first saw the girl with the red bag. She walked into the station like she knew exactly where she was going, but didn't want to get there yet. She had a hood pulled over her head and a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She didn't look at Walter, but she sat across from him on the bench. She stayed for exactly 1 song, then left. He didn't think much of it, but she came back the next day. Same bench, same time, same silence. And Walter began to play that 1 song, Clair de Lune, a little later in his set, just in time for when she would arrive. The first time Walter played Clair de Lune for her, she didn't look up. She sat with her hands in her lap, hood still up, staring at the floor like the notes were washing over her, and she didn't want to move in case they stopped. He noticed her shoulders relax halfway through the piece. Her fingers twitched slightly at the higher notes. When the last chord faded, she stood and walked away without a word. She didn't clap, didn't say thank you, didn't smile. But she came back the next day, and the day after that. Walter had played for strangers his entire adult life, in classrooms, in churches, at small-town recitals, and now in the middle of a train station where the sound of shoes on tile often tried to drown him out. He didn't expect reactions anymore. He didn't need applause. But the girl with the red bag made him start paying attention again. She arrived at exactly the same time, 3:07 p.m., just before the commuter crowd started to build. She always wore the hooded sweatshirt, even when the weather turned warm. The red canvas bag was frayed at the strap. She never took it off. She never pulled out a phone, never looked around, just sat and listened. Walter adjusted his set without thinking. He used to play Clair de Lune last. It was his wife's favorite. He'd saved it like a closing line in a letter. But now he played it in the middle, right at 3:10. It felt like handing someone a note you weren't sure they would read. He still didn't know her name, still hadn't heard her voice. But he knew she was listening, and that was enough. One afternoon, a man with a rolling suitcase dropped a few coins into the tip jar and leaned over. "She your granddaughter?" Walter shook his head. "No." The man looked again. "She comes every day." Walter nodded. The man waited like he expected more of an answer. Walter didn't give one. She stayed for one song, then left. Never more, never less. After she walked out, Walter would pause for a moment. Just a second. He never watched her go. He just looked at the bench once it was empty. When he got home in the evenings, the silence felt different. He still lived in the same one-bedroom apartment, same books on the shelf, same photo of Mary Ann on the nightstand. But now, when he sat down with his tea, he caught himself thinking about the girl. Not in a worried way, just wondering who she was, why that song, why she kept coming. It reminded him of teaching again. That moment when a student didn't say much but came to every lesson. When they didn't ask for help but watched everything you did. He remembered one boy in particular, David, 5th grade. Rarely spoke. But he'd copy Walter's finger placement exactly, learned just by watching. Walter never forgot the students who paid attention in quiet ways. The girl in the station reminded him of that. One day, just before she arrived, he found himself wiping down the keys with more care, straightening the bench, checking his watch twice. It wasn't about impressing her. It was about being ready. Because somehow, without saying a word, she had made it feel like what he was doing mattered again. And even if she never said anything, he wanted the music to meet her where she was. So he played. Same time, same piece, same quiet moment between two people who had never spoken. And somehow, it was enough. On Wednesday, she didn't come. Walter checked the clock 3 times. 3:06, 3:10, 3:15. The bench across from the piano stayed empty. He played Clair de Lune anyway. No one noticed. The people kept moving. Announcements echoed through the terminal. Someone dropped a suitcase. A toddler cried in the distance. But the bench stayed empty. He kept his head down and finished the set, packed up slower than usual, ran his fingers along the worn edge of the keys before closing the cover. Maybe she missed a train. Maybe she got sick. Maybe she was just tired. Thursday came. Same thing. No red bag, no hooded sweatshirt, no girl. He played the song again. Softer this time. Let the high notes stretch out longer than usual. He waited after the final chord like he expected something to happen. But nothing did. Friday came. Still no sign of her. He kept looking without realizing it, glancing toward the main doors every time they opened, noticing red jackets, listening for quiet footsteps. The bench across from him looked colder without her there. Saturday was quieter in the station. Fewer trains, fewer people. He played a shorter set, only the songs he knew best. When he finished Clair de Lune, he stared at the empty space across from him and sat in silence for nearly a minute. He couldn't explain why it mattered so much. He had no name, no backstory, nothing to go on. She could have been anyone. But now he missed her, not just because she came to listen, but because she stayed. He hadn't realized how much that meant to him. On Sunday, he didn't bring the thermos, didn't clean the keys beforehand, just walked in, sat down, and played, because that's what he did. But his heart wasn't in it. He ended early, went home early, didn't sleep much. That night he pulled out an old notebook, one he hadn't touched in years, a gift from Mary Ann. Leather cover, blank pages inside. He used to write little phrases in it, song ideas, quotes, nothing serious. He opened to a new page and wrote just one sentence. She didn't say anything, and it still mattered. He closed the notebook and placed it by the piano in his apartment. The next day he played like usual, but something had shifted. He didn't stop watching the door, didn't stop hoping she'd come back. But the bench stayed empty, and the song felt lonelier than it had before. By Tuesday, Walter had stopped expecting her. He still looked, still noticed, still waited a little longer before starting Claire de Lune. But he told himself not to. Told himself that people disappear sometimes, and that's just how the world works. Still, when the doors opened at 3:06, and it wasn't her, something in his chest tightened. The station was louder that day. A group of school kids passed through, talking over each other. A man with a portable speaker played music too close to where Walter sat. He kept playing anyway. He always did. But it was different now. When she had been there, even in silence, there was something steady about it. A rhythm to her arrival. A comfort in the knowing. She never smiled, never waved, never spoke. But she stayed. And now she didn't. He didn't know why that felt so heavy. He thought about Mary Ann a lot that week. How she used to bring him a cup of coffee halfway through his set. How she sat with a paperback and never read more than 5 pages. How she would tap her foot quietly when he played her favorite songs. When she got sick, Walter had played softer, not just in volume, in feeling. The notes felt like they weighed more back then, like every one of them had to carry something unsaid. That's how it felt again now. He played the same songs, but there was more space between the notes, more wondering. He thought maybe the girl had just moved on, that something had changed. Or maybe nothing had changed, and she simply stopped coming. Maybe the music had done what it needed to. Maybe it had been enough. But it didn't feel like closure. It felt like something left open. And he wasn't used to that. On Thursday, a station worker came by during his break. A young man in a green vest who usually nodded but didn't talk much. "You all right today?" he asked. Walter looked up. "I'm fine." The man nodded slowly. "Just seems a little quieter without her." Walter didn't answer. He didn't need to. The man said, "She was here a lot, always came at the same time, never said anything, but she listened." Walter nodded. The worker paused. "She left something. I think it was for you." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out an envelope. No name. Just the word piano written across the front. Walter took it without saying a word. The man walked off. He opened the envelope slowly, careful not to bend it. Inside was a single piece of notebook paper, folded once. The handwriting was clean but small. "I didn't know how to say thank you, so I didn't. I just came. I listened. Some days that was all I could do. Some days your music was the only quiet thing in my life. I'm sorry I left without a word. I had to. But I didn't forget. And I hope you don't either." Walter stared at the page for a long time. Then he folded it and placed it in his jacket pocket. He sat back down at the piano, and when the clock hit 3:10, he played Clair de Lune. Not for the bench, not for the station, just for her. Because now, he knew she had heard him, and that she wanted him to know. She had come back in the only way she could. Walter played slower that day, not because he was tired, but because every note felt like it had weight again. The letter sat in his jacket pocket. He hadn't read it again. He didn't need to. The words were there, clear as anything he had ever taught or written. Some days your music was the only quiet thing in my life. He didn't know what the girl had gone through. He didn't need the details. He understood silence. He understood showing up when you didn't have the energy to explain why you were there. That letter had filled the space she left behind, not with answers, but with meaning. And that was enough. The rest of the week moved differently. He still played the same hours, still watched the people pass by. But now, when he played Clair de Lune, it wasn't routine anymore. It was a message. He didn't know who was listening. Maybe no one. Maybe someone he hadn't noticed yet. But he played it like it mattered. And that changed everything. On Friday, a mother with 2 young kids stopped in front of the piano. The little boy stared at Walter's fingers, wide-eyed. The girl spun in slow circles to the music. Walter kept playing, but smiled a little. They didn't stay long. But before they left, the boy looked up and said, "That sounded like a bedtime song." Walter nodded. "Maybe it is." Saturday afternoon, he played a song he hadn't touched in years, one of his own, a simple melody he used to teach beginners. Marianne had always said it reminded her of walking on a cold morning with warm coffee. He didn't know why he played it. It just came out. And someone stopped to listen. Not the girl. A man in a business suit, briefcase in hand. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes closed. Stayed through the whole piece. Then gave Walter a quiet nod before leaving. That night, Walter opened the notebook again, the one with Marianne's inscription in the front. He added a new line. "Sometimes we never hear the words, but we know what they meant." Sunday, the bench was still empty. He didn't expect her to come back, not in the same way, but something had shifted inside him. She had returned once, with that letter. And in doing that, she reminded him why he played at all. Not for applause, not for tips, for the person who needed it. Even if he never knew who that was. Even if they never said a word. He played Clair de Lune just before 3 that day. Let it breathe. Let the silence stretch between the notes. A woman walking by slowed her steps. A man near the vending machine stopped chewing. Someone upstairs leaned over the railing, eyes fixed on his hands. He didn't look up. He just played. Because now, every note had somewhere to land. The letter stayed in Walter's coat pocket for 3 weeks. He never took it out again, but he knew every word. He could see the handwriting in his mind, hear the voice behind it, even though he'd never heard her speak. Some days, he still glanced at the bench at 3:10, not expecting her, just remembering. Routine returned, but it felt different now. The music hadn't changed. His seat hadn't changed, but the meaning had. He played with more care, not louder, not more dramatically, just with attention, like he was putting something into each note that wasn't there before, like he was leaving room for someone else to feel what they needed to feel. The station moved around him, like always, feet on tile, voices in motion, people passing, pausing, leaving. But some started to linger. He noticed a young couple who came every Thursday, always sat on the floor by the far column. They never spoke during the music, just held hands and listened. An older woman with shopping bags paused near the schedule board every Friday. She stood with her eyes closed while he played anything slow. A security guard who used to walk past without a glance now stopped and stayed through 2 songs before resuming his route. None of them said much, but Walter saw it. He never kept count, never made a list, but he noticed, and that was enough. One rainy Tuesday, he found something new in the tip jar. Not money, a piece of folded paper, no envelope, just a note. He unfolded it slowly. The paper was lined, torn from a notebook. The handwriting was different, sharper, messier, but the message was clear. She used to talk about your music, said it helped her feel normal again. She doesn't say much to anyone, but she did about this. Can you play the song again? No name, no explanation. Walter folded the note and placed it in his jacket pocket, right next to the letter. Then he sat down and started to play. Not the warm-up songs, not the quiet jazz. He went straight to Claire de Lune. He played it slower than usual. Let the notes stretch into the edges of the station. Let the silence around them fill up the rest. He didn't know who had written the note, didn't know if she would ever return, but he knew she had heard it once, and now someone else had heard it too, and that was reason enough. When the song ended, he didn't look up, didn't wait for applause, didn't expect anything at all. He just rested his hands on the keys for a moment, then began the next song. It was strange how something so quiet could feel so full. Like a letter read once but remembered always. Like a girl with a red bag who said nothing, but stayed. It was early April when the bench filled again. Not with her, not yet. A boy took the seat. 16, maybe 17. Hoodie pulled tight, backpack at his feet. He didn't look at Walter, just stared ahead like he didn't want to be seen. Walter played as usual. Warm-up pieces, a little Ellington, a hymn he hadn't touched in years. The boy didn't move. Then, when Walter began Claire de Lune, the boy leaned forward slightly, barely noticeable. But Walter saw it. At the end of the song, the boy stood up, walked over to the piano without making eye contact, dropped a folded piece of paper into the tip jar. No money, just the note. Then he walked away. Walter waited until the boy was gone before picking it up. The paper was creased twice, notebook lined. No name. She said this song made her feel safe. She didn't explain why. I don't think she could, but she always came home different after she listened to you play. I thought you should know. Walter folded the note carefully, added it to his coat pocket next to the other 2. He didn't need to write anything back. He placed his hands on the keys and played it again. Claire de Lune, the song that now lived inside every corner of the station. The one he played for his wife, then for the girl, now for whoever came after. He didn't know if the boy would return, didn't know if the girl had sent him, didn't ask. He didn't play for answers. He played because someone, somewhere, needed to hear it. And maybe that was the only thing he had left to give that still made sense. The next day, a woman paused beside the piano. She didn't sit, just stood close, hands in her coat pockets. "Was that Debussy?" she asked after he finished. Walter nodded. It was. "It's beautiful," she said, then added, "My daughter listens to it every night before bed, from a recording. I didn't know where she'd heard it before." She looked at the bench across from him, then looked back at Walter. "Now I do." She smiled once, walked away. Walter didn't say anything, just waited a few beats, then began again. Not for the crowd, not for a reaction, just for the one who might be listening, even if they were far away, even if they didn't say a word. He had started playing that song because it meant something to his wife. Now it meant something to strangers. And somehow, that felt just as important. She came back on a Thursday. Walter saw her before she saw him. She walked in from the far entrance, not the one she used before. No red bag, just a plain gray backpack. Hair longer, shoulders straighter, hoodie gone. She didn't go to the bench right away. She stood near the schedule board watching. He didn't stop playing. His hands moved through a slow Gershwin piece, steady, simple. But his chest tightened when he realized it was her. There was no mistaking it. Same stillness. Same way of listening with her whole body. She waited until the song ended. Then she walked forward. Not to the bench, to him. She didn't speak right away, just stood there with her hands in her pockets, looking at the piano. Walter nodded once, quietly. She looked up. "Thank you," she said. That was it. Just 2 words. But they hit harder than anything he'd heard in months. "I didn't know how to say it before," she added. "So I didn't." "You just came," he said. She nodded. It was the only place that felt quiet. He didn't press. Didn't ask what had happened or where she'd been. That wasn't the kind of conversation this was. He just listened. She stood there a while, not looking around, not in a hurry. "I used to feel like I was disappearing," she said, eyes still on the keys. But the music made it feel like someone noticed, even if they didn't say anything. Walter looked down at the piano. "I noticed," he said. She nodded. She didn't cry. Neither did he. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was quiet, steady, like everything else he had come to understand in his later years. Grief, routine, connection. Most of the things that matter don't arrive loudly. They arrive slow and sure, and without needing to explain themselves. "I'm not here every day anymore," she said, "but sometimes I pass through." "You're always welcome," he said. She reached into her backpack and handed him something folded. "I didn't know if I should give this to you, but I wrote it the day I left." He took it gently. She stepped back, gave a small wave, and walked toward the exit. He didn't read the letter right away. He just sat at the bench, hands resting on the keys. Then, after a moment, he opened it. "You'll never know how much I needed the sound of that piano, but I hope this helps you understand. There were days I didn't think I'd make it through the week, but I always made it to 3:10. And that was enough to keep going. You gave me that. Thank you." Walter folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. Then he played Claire de Lune. For her. For everyone like her. For all the people who never said a word, but stayed. Walter kept playing. He came to the station every morning just like before. Same jacket, same seat, same careful routine. But something had changed, and he knew it. People stopped more now. Not crowds, not applause, but presence. The kind you can feel. The kind that tells you someone is there and really listening. The girl didn't return every day, but some days she did. When she did, she sat closer now. Not across the terminal. Sometimes even on the bench just a few steps from the piano. She didn't always say hello, and Walter never expected her to. But when their eyes met, she nodded. He nodded back. That was enough. There were others too. The boy in the hoodie returned once. No note this time. Just sat, listened, and left. The mother who had mentioned her daughter passed through again, this time with the girl, who stood perfectly still for the whole piece. A man in a faded military jacket came every Sunday afternoon and stayed through 3 songs. Walter noticed all of it. The station still buzzed, still echoed with announcements and rushing feet. But within that, a space had formed, a place where people could pause, where things could feel quieter, even if only for a moment. He started playing new pieces, old ones he hadn't touched in years. Simple things. Things full of feeling but stripped of performance. Pieces that left room for someone else's memory to step in. One afternoon, a woman approached while he was packing up. "Are you the man who plays Clair de Lune?" she asked. He nodded. She smiled. "I used to hear it in high school. I didn't think I liked classical music until I heard it here. I started listening to it at night. Helped me sleep." She didn't stay long, just said thank you and left. Walter placed his hands back on the piano and played it again. Not because it was scheduled, not because it was expected, just because someone needed to hear it. Maybe her, maybe someone else. He played it with no rush, no force, just the way he always had. Soft, honest. The notes filled the terminal slowly, not to impress, just to be heard. When the last chord faded, he didn't move right away, just let the silence settle. A few people clapped quietly. One woman wiped her eyes. Someone else whispered, "That was beautiful." He didn't answer, just smiled, packed up, went home. The letters he'd received now sat in a small wooden box on his kitchen shelf, alongside a photograph of Mary Ann and a folded piece of sheet music that he hadn't written on in years. He didn't look at the letters every day, but he kept them close. They reminded him that what he did had landed somewhere, that the music didn't just drift out into nothing. It had reached people, and some of them had reached back. The next morning, he arrived early. The station was quiet. The light coming through the high windows was soft and clear. He sat down at the piano. No rush, no crowd. He began to play. Not for a schedule, not for a routine,
But because someone had come back.
and because someone else might still be listening. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.